The MLB offseason is off to the races, and we're beginning to see how the pieces will play themselves out. The Philadelphia Phillies remain at the heart of a ton of the MLB rumors, with much of it surrounding Alec Bohm. Well, a new replacement has potentially entered the conversation as Nolan Arenado has been mentioned in a mock trade that has me a bit fired up here. So I want to dive into the latest reports surrounding each of the members of this Phillies team. Why I think Arenado maybe need to be talked about a little bit more has been the case. So let's dive into things, and I want to start off with some pretty commonly known stuff. We continue to get updates regarding the Phillies reportedly interested in 30-year-old free agent Alex Bregman and 25-year-old left-handed starter Garrett Crochet. So it does feel like the Crochet news continues to pick up more and more traction. I know Luke dropped his thoughts on a full video breaking that down earlier this week. You can tap into that for a little bit more, but I wanted to talk more deeply about the third base position here. Now, with Alec Bohm, we kind of know the story. They're coming off a season which really was a tale of two halves. Still 28 years old, a guy who started in the All-Star game this year. Clearly a good baseball player. Finished with 15 home runs, 97 RBIs in the season, a .332 on base percentage in 554 at bats, did tally 155 hits, was leading the MLB in RBIs for a solid portion of the first half of the season, but really the production dropped off. It is very clear to me that things have been worn inside the organization as far as his personality, his outbursts, the way that he carries himself. It is not a brush over thing that this man was benched in the playoffs after the great season that he did have. So this isn't a huge surprise to me. And dive into a couple more reports they want to address. This coming from Bob Nightingale here. It says the Phillies have been shopping Castellanos for nearly 2 years. They have made Bohm available. Spoken about Bohm and Justin Crawford in extensive trade talks with the White Sox for Garrett Crochet. If they trade Bohm, they will go over Alex Bregman or Willie Adams. I'm going to brush over the Willie Adams because I would not like that I would not like that whatsoever. Much more in on Bregman for that conversation. We know who he is as a baseball player, guy who's been around plenty of time. Coming off a season in which he had 26 home runs, 75 RBIs, a .315 on-base percentage there, had 151 hits in 581 at-bats. A guy 30 years old, still has some good years of baseball ahead of him. I guess part of the conversation or the hesitancy on Bregman is going to be the price point. I think it's a universal thing. I think my feel on things is Bregman's just straight up not going to get an offer in the ballpark of what he needs. I don't think he fits that caliber of player that's going to get this monstrous, $200 million plus deal for 10 seasons, the way that there's been some reports on him. By the way, he's already 30. I can't imagine that it's going to be that lengthy of a deal. So if you can kind of strike that middle ground where you sign him as a free agent for maybe like a 3 to 5 year deal or something like that, I'm in on Bregman. That I do think that is something. He's a winner. He's got multiple World Series rings on his finger, has done it all at the MLB level. And while I've been pretty anti-Bregman during his time on the Astros over there, he is a guy that if you put him in red pinstripes, my tune is a little bit different there. But beyond Bregman, there's another name that did enter this conversation, and that's where I did want to pull up this mock trade from MLB Network here, that this one did fire me up a little bit. So to list it off exactly, it is between the Phillies and the Cardinals. The Phillies will be sending out Justin Crawford, a number 3 prospect, Mick Abel, which is the number 6 prospect, and then Lazard Montes, who I'm not super familiar with, but is the Seattle number 3 prospect here. In return, bringing back Nolan Arenado, Ryan Helsley, Emerson Hancock, and some cash considerations there. This is the type of deal that I do think would move the meter for this Phillies team. I like Arenado as well. I kind of have mixed feelings about whether I prefer Arenado or Bregman moving forward. To pull up exactly what Arenado is bringing to the table from last season, the stats that he produced, we're talking about 16 home runs, 71 RBIs, a .325 on-base percentage, 44 walks, and 157 hits in his 578 at-bats there. A little bit older at age 33, will be 34 by the time next season rolls around. I think I still lean Bregman out of the available options, but the reliever side of things does intrigue me here as well. And to touch on what Ryan Helsley brings to the conversation here, we're talking about in 65 games last year, he pitched 66.1 innings total, had just 3 home runs allowed, 79 strikeouts in 66.1 innings is really good stuff there. Gave up just 50 hits on the entire season, a 2.04 ERA, a 1.1 WHIP. This is a guy that I would love to bring into the bullpen. And while we're having all these conversations about the outfield, about Juan Soto, about the starting pitcher, about the third base position, let's not forget what an issue the bullpen was at the playoffs this year. That is really why and how things blew up for this Phillies team. And I do think that has to be addressed if this team is going to have a different outlook next season. Now, to talk a little bit why I think this is even further of an issue, I think that Hofgad is gone. That Jeff Hoffman was asked about kind of his outlook for the season, and he brought up potentially being a starter once again. And the quote that he exactly laid out here is, quote, "I think I would be a great starter if given that opportunity again. It was cool seeing what Ronaldo Lopez and Jordan Hicks did last year, and for me, with how healthy I am and what I've done the last few years with my arsenal, it's an interesting thought. It makes sense that guys with deeper arsenals than most relievers have found success." So this is how Hoffman started his MLB career, that he did come out of college and was looked at as a starting pitcher, and honestly just straight up wasn't good enough. That this was a guy seeing himself on the outskirts of the league. I get the hunger of wanting to, step back and prove what you were unable to the first go, but Hoffman's been excellent out of the bullpen, and he was another guy who did blow up in the playoffs and did not deliver to the caliber of what you hoped or needed him to for this roster. But I do think the direction for him, as kind of like a man-to-man advice here, would be like, dude, you're onto something as a reliever. You found your lane as a player. Stick with it. Let's not try and get back to that. Now, if he really wants to be a starting pitcher, that's the desire. Unfortunately, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But I don't see a world where we're talking about Jeff Hoffman being a part of the starting rotation. I get there's conversations to be had there on this Phillies team as well, as Taijuan Walker sort of penciled in for that fifth spot there. I do think that they're going to address that to some extent, that there will be another starter there. But I did not love hearing that coming out of Hoffman's mouth there. Now, another update that I did want to throw in, Juan Soto will continue to be the apple of the eye of everyone across Major League Baseball across this entire offseason. And we've kind of all had the feeling that this is a desperation play for the Phillies, or, they're not in the running per se. They're kind of on that outskirts looking in, trying to get a seat at the table or have an opportunity there. That's pretty much how I still feel. And we did get this update from Todd Zaleski here saying, sources said that the Phillies have not met with Soto, but expectations remain that they will. One report said the Phillies have not even expressed interest in Soto to his agent, Scott Boras, but there has been communication between the two parties since the end of the season. So I did think it was a little off-putting and surprising that there was allegedly no communication between the Phillies and Juan Soto when you just factor in the overlap in relationships both with Soto and this team, as he's obviously played with Harper, played with Trey Turner, played with Kyle Schwarber, had Kevin Long as his hitting coach. There's a ton of relationships there. And then on the agency side of things, Scott Boras represents seemingly every big name in the MLB. So there's players on this Phillies team that you would have had to at least have a conversation with him about beyond just Juan Soto. So if you got him on the phone already, might as well drop a line and say, hey, what's up with Juan? What's the story there? What's going on? So I'm not declaring this completely dead, but I do think it's fair to assess that Soto is the long shot at this point. And for what it's worth, maybe that isn't the direction the Phillies need to go anyway. That I would rather them accomplish a couple notable upgrades at the third base position, at the outfield position, on the pitching staff, whether that is as a starter with a guy like Garrett Crochet or out of the bullpen, which I personally feel is a far bigger priority here, adding another key arm there. Those are things that I think if you can accomplish each of those, that moves the meter more for this Phillies team than just one big splash. Yes, Juan Soto is an unbelievable baseball player. I'm not disputing that by any means. But do you need to carve out $700 million to bring in this guy rather than, doing a couple small upgrades here? If you get better at the third base position, if you get better at the outfield spot, that you're able to stabilize things where you're not running out Brandon Marsh and Johan Rojas each playing in the field right now. Like, there's things that I think this team needs to do, and when you're kind of putting that checklist or pecking order of what should be the priority, they kind of already have made their investment in their quote-unquote big fishes on this team. So I don't think Juan Soto is going to be a part of that. But maybe this sort of trade, and to pull up the mock trade once again, is something that could accomplish all these things at once. I do think the writing is on the wall for Alec Bohm ever coming back to this Phillies team, that I think there's so much conversation, so much of the talking points, that the toothpaste has gotten out of the tube a bit too far at this point. I don't know if you can jam it back in there and put this dude back at third base. We might be getting the F and hate it here quotes all over again. It does feel like it is too far gone for that. How you fix it, how you upgrade is the biggest storyline for here, because as I've talked about Alec Bohm throughout, the toughest spot the Phillies find themselves in is he does not suck as a baseball player. This is not a nothing that you just need to get somebody good. Alec Bohm is a pretty good baseball player. Inconsistent, sure. The personality you don't love, absolutely valid there. But to actually improve this Phillies team chances of winning, you have to find a way to upgrade there. This is not just a change, it has to be an upgrade. But there are some options popping on the table. So whether it is Nolan Arenado there, whether it could be Alex Bregman here, I do like the names that are beginning to be mentioned and connected to this Phillies team. So a lot still to go down. We're getting closer to winter meetings where talks are expected to significantly increase, and maybe pen starts hitting paper, hands begin to be shaken as deals go down. That is what we're looking forward to for this Phillies team. But I'm going to be along every step of the ride, breaking breaking down what is going down next in this organization and my thoughts on everything there and in between. So appreciate each and every one of you guys rocking with me. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Let's get this Phillies Digest family growing as big as possible. We got a long offseason ahead and hopefully a World Series run returning next year. So appreciate each and every one of you guys for rocking with me, and talk with you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.